Now we're going to talk about 16th note rests. So just like 4 16th notes equals the same value as 1 quarter note, the same thing goes for 16th note rests. 4 16th note rests equals the value of 1 quarter note rest or 1 quarter note, however you want to look at it. Now take a look at what a 16th note rest looks like. It looks very similar to an 8th note rest, but now you see 2 little dots there instead of just 1, which means it's half of the value of an 8th note rest. So 1 8th note rest equals the same value as 2 16th note rests. Okay, so it works the same as the note values. This time we're just not playing anything. So let's put on the metronome at 60 beats per minute, and I'll show you what it sounds like to not play anything for a 16th note rest. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a. So it's as simple as that. Don't play anything for the value of a 16th note. Now I want to mention one thing. Generally when you look at a full bar of music and you're not supposed to play anything for that full bar, you'll have a rest there that indicates don't play anything for this whole bar, and it's called a whole rest. But because I wanted to give you an idea of what a 16th note rest looks like visually, I just threw a bunch of 16th note rests in the bar. Now if you count those 16th note rests, you'll notice there's 16 of them, because how many 16th notes fits in one bar of 4/4? And the answer is 16. Okay, and so the same thing goes for a quarter note. There's be 4 quarter note rests that fit in there, or 8 eighth note rests, or 12 eighth note triplet rests. Okay? I'm just throwing them in there just to give you a visual demonstration of what it looks like. Now let's take a look at exercise 2. Exercise 2, I basically play all the notes except one 16th note. And the last 16th note, which is on the ah of 4. Okay, so you don't play anything for the ah of 4. I'll do this for you guys at 60 and 100 beats per minute. Now let's take a look at exercise 3. I start to move the 16th note triplet rest around the kit, or not move the 16th note triplet rest around the kit since we're not playing anything. I basically play 3 notes in the snare, 3 in the high tom, 3 in the mid, and 3 in the low, and I'm dropping off the last 16th note of every beat. So 1 E and ah, 2 E and ah, 3 E and ah, 4 E and ah. Now a lot of times you'll also see this notated with an 8th note on the end of each count. And if you put an 8th note on the end, that means that 8th note lasts the duration of that count. And so on the drums, we just hit a single note. And so the note doesn't really have any sustain. Now, if someone were to be playing piano to that, they'd actually let the 8th note ring out that whole time. But if they saw a 16th note rest, they'd know to let off and not have any sound during that resting period. Okay, on the drums, it's a little bit different, but it is really, really important for you to recognize the difference, because you're going to see things notated both ways, and we'll talk more about this later, so I don't want to get too much into it now, but I just want to prepare you for it. Okay, so right now, I've notated it simply as a 16th note rest. So don't play anything for a 16th note. But later on, you might see an 8th note there and no rest, right? Because 1 8th note is the value of 2 16th notes. Okay, so we won't get too much into that. I know you're going to get it later, especially as you continue to go through these things and internalize everything the way we have been. Okay, so now I'm going to play exercise 3 for you guys at 60 and 100 beats per minute. Now, exercise 4 is a very, very fun groove. I love these types of grooves that incorporate, 16th notes on the hi-hat with, just a simple kick and snare pattern. Now, if you look at that, you're going to see a 16th note rest on the E of 2, and then another 16th note rest on the AND of 3. And the right hand is playing all the notes on the hi-hat. If you're a beginner and you're just starting out, you can play this at 80 beats per minute for 2 minutes straight before moving on to the next one, because a lot of the techniques associated with getting that fast right hand just takes a little bit more time as far as muscle development and stuff like that. So I don't want you getting hung up on this. It's more important for you to just know what 16th note rests are, be able to internalize what that feels like for a 16th note rest to pass, than it is for you to develop the techniques associated with this one specific groove. Okay? So I'm going to play this for you guys at 60 and 100 beats per minute. Now, exercise 5 is similar to exercise 4. It's a little bit challenging because the right hand, again, is all in the hi-hat, and we have a 16th note rest on count 3 as well as count 4, which really kind of displaces the groove. We're not going to get into beat displacement or anything like that, but I think putting the rest there really, really will help you internalize what the 16th note rest feels like. So it's very deliberate what I've done here. I'm not just giving you a challenging groove just for the sake of trying to stump you. I don't think it'll stump you. I honestly think you can do it. It's going to take some practice, but you definitely can do it. Okay, once you play that groove, we go into a fill based off of 16th notes. So take a look at that fill. We start on the high tom. We rest on the E of 1. Okay, then we play 2 E, and then we have 2 16th note rests on the AND and the A of 2. Now, if I wanted to, what other rest could I have put in there? And if you said 8th note rest, you are absolutely correct. I could have just put an 8th note rest in there. It probably would have made it look a little bit cleaner. But I really wanted to show you what it looks like to have the 16th note rest in there and no other rest. And then we have 16th notes all on count 3, high tom to the snare. And then again, we have 2 rests on the AND and the A of 4. So I'm going to play this for you guys at 60 beats per minute and then again at 100 beats per minute. So that is the end of the 16th note rest section. Now what I need you to do is learn exercises 2 and 3, starting at 60 beats per minute, get them up to 100 beats per minute. Once you get them to 100 beats per minute, you can move on to exercises 4 and 5. Okay, 4 and 5 only need to be played at 80 beats per minute for 2 minutes perfectly before moving on. Now I know you can do this. Please do not get discouraged. I know it's getting a little bit more challenging now that we're getting into like 16th notes, and now we're getting into not playing 16th notes, and it might be getting a little confusing, but just bear with me and continue to practice, and I promise you're going to see huge results. So once you've completed that, you can move on to the next section.